A very good afternoon to each and every one of you, and welcome to The Whip, our new program where we focus on all things parliamentary. And we're happy that you guys can join us wherever you're joining us from. If you're joining us on Twitter, you're joining us from YouTube, you're joining us on Facebook, or whichever part of the diaspora, the Caribbean region you are, internationally, or whether you're at home here in Indiana. We welcome each and every one of you, as is the usual custom whenever we come and here, we ask you guys to share the live stream. We have two important guests who are going to be joining us as we go through the paces of two very, very important parliamentary issues, folks. Two very, very important parliamentary issues. But first, let us get to our introduction that I love so much. Let's get to our introduction, folks.
We're not hearing you.
I was saying welcome, Honorable Khemraj Ramjattan. I think this is officially your first afternoon on The Whip, your first program, your first showing.
No, I think it's my second. I think I was here before.
Okay. Great.
Thanks very much for being on the program.
Yeah, quite a number of issues we're going to be discussing this afternoon. And I want to share with our guests what is going to be our order paper for this afternoon. We are going to be talking about two financial papers that were recently laid in National Assembly. Financial paper number 1, which dealt in part with the payment for some Sputnik vaccines. And those characters are now very, very shady. And that deal has become very, very shady and of national interest. And then we're going to be talking about another item that came on financial paper number 2. Financial paper number 2, which dealt with funding for regional joint support teams, quote unquote. And with that, again, I want to welcome my guest for this afternoon, the one and only Mr. Khemraj Ramjattan.
Thanks, Sharad, and I'm glad to be here, and also glad to be carrying our narrative to the people out there as to what transpired on these two financial papers and some of the very serious questions that we have, which also were dealt with by the ministers, but quite frankly, not properly dealt with. And of course, lots of questions now in view of a number of findings that we have dug into. It is going to be an interesting half an hour or so, as I indicated to you.
So we learned from a very, very a comprehensive reporting out of a Norwegian newspaper called VG, that, for instance, they were tracking this sale of Sputnik V vaccines via one Sheikh Ahmed Dalmouk Al Maktoum, and they were tracking these sales of the vaccine through countries Ghana, Russia, Pakistan, and Guyana, including Iraq, and showing that several persons that were affiliated with this gentleman, again, Sheikh Ahmed Dalmouk Al Maktoum, including Stephen Seagal, Morten Hassan, and one Umar Farouk Zahur, seem to be very, very shady characters, some of them wanted by international police and all of that. And we know, for instance, that they were here and they were given the royal treatment. Now we're learning that they are connected to our purchase of these Sputnik V vaccines, and the cost that we're paying is actually twice the market cost for these vaccines. What are your thoughts?
Well, you know, that puts a lot of suspicions on this transaction. And the fact that we were dealing with a middleman who we understand now has connections with a certain crook out of Norway, the same Morgensen fella, has really shifted this, what is supposed to be a legitimate transaction, onto the realms of a lot of speculation and a lot of suspicions. And I am glad that, of course, the speaker allowed the question, and of course the leader of the opposition asked the question, along with very many other persons asking the questions as to what really this thing was all about. And quite frankly, I am not very much impressed now. I would like to go deeper into the thing to find out indeed if this transaction was really at arm's length. We have very good relationships, Sherrod, with the embassy, the Russian embassy here in Guyana. And I understand that they have, because in a matter like this, but dealing with arms and ammunition, you ask those people what their prices are, and they generally would ensure that you get it at the manufacturer's price, because it's country to country. And what is now being told to us is that by this government, the PPP government, that they were told by somebody at the Russian authorities that they must go deal with a middleman. Now, I got some serious questions about that, because, you know, especially in the what's called price gouging here, because it's almost $21 paid for the thing, when the World Health Organization had come out with something that said that a Sputnik is for $10. So we paid in the vicinity of another $600 million for that last batch of 200,000 doses. And the fact that you had, especially this fella Jack Dale, that was involved with talking about and knowing a thing or two about this Sheikh Al-Maktoum. I didn't hear you.
I was only saying there.
Yes,
that
but whatever it is, they have a
those.
bad history in relation to contracting through people and not dealing with the Russian embassy or whosoever is the embassy. You generally, when these things are being, are you hearing me?
Yes, I am hearing you. And as
we're having some problems, it seems.
Your video seemed to be giving us some trouble, but we also have the Honorable Amanza Walton-Desir joining us.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Welcome, Amanza. Welcome. Khemraj, go right ahead.
Yeah, and so I'm saying that this thing is with a lot of now what I will call enlightened, you know, speculation and tremendous suspicions, because of the nature of the transaction being through an intermediary, which intermediary now we know has some connections with a con man, and even if the intermediary himself might not be one that is of questionable character. I don't like the ideas of people jumping in an executive jet, coming to Guyana, meeting a couple of the ministers, getting the red carpet treatment, and then we then paying them $600 million more for medicines that we could have ordinarily gotten at a cheaper rate directly from the Russian government. And as I said just before we got the little problems there, that the Russian government would want to deal with the government of Guyana. And so I don't really take that thing that what Minister Frank had indicated, that they were told to go to a third man. That thing got corruption, probably corruption on both sides. Because if you are going to now say that the world market price for these things are $10, and then some Russian official putting you onto a third man, that could be corruption also from the Russian side. That they want a little payback. And so, because we understand that sometimes in governments, these things happen. And then another payback for certain people in Guyana here. And then a certain portion also for the sheik, so that he could come with the fancy executive jet and all of that. And this is $600 million, And what is also important is the fact that it was a medicine. It was at that time when the transaction was done, it was not a WHO approved medicine. Although we are now learning, and I want to be fair to Frank Anthony, that there are some important authorities that have indicated that Sputnik is pretty good. But other than that, this thing stinks to high heavens, in my opinion, in view of the high cost, almost double the cost. There is corruption here, and especially dealing with these intermediaries.
I want to bring Amanza into the conversation, but first I want to show that footage of the leader of the opposition very intensely putting the questions to Frank Anthony on this very COVID vaccine issue and getting the response and implicating this Sheikh Ahmed Dalmouk Al Maktoum in the purchase of these vaccines. Then we're going to come back, and I'd love to hear Amanza's thoughts.
Understand that this is money that has already been spent. What I would like to find out from you is what vaccines did we purchase, how many did we purchase, and from whom were these purchases made? It was not. I asked the question, how many vaccines by type were purchased, what price did we pay for them, and from whom did we purchase these vaccines? That's the question.
Thank you, Honorable Leader of the Opposition, Honorable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much, Honorable Harman, for the question. As I said before, with this contingency, we have been able to purchase 200,000 doses of Sputnik V vaccines. And we have also purchased 100,000 doses of the Sinopharm vaccines. With the Sputnik V vaccine, we have been supplied through the United Arab Emirates and through the offices of Mr. Ahmed Dalmoud Al Maktoum, and he has, through his offices, have been supplying us with the Sputnik vaccines.
And as we have said before, we now know that lots of the characters associated with Mr. Ahmed Maktoum are very shady characters. They wanted by international police and all of that. And we're going to talk a little bit later about why that WHO approval is so integral to this vaccination process. Amanza, what are your general thoughts about where we are currently on this Sputnik V vaccine issue?
Good afternoon. My mic was muted. Khemraj, good afternoon. Sherrod, good afternoon. And to our viewing audience. I share Khemraj's sentiments on this issue in terms of the transaction surrounding the vaccine. I think one of the things that I wanted to clear up, because I notice it's a misconception being peddled across social media, that we are telling people don't take the vaccine, etc. We have called on the government to halt the administration of the Sputnik vaccine from those that batch of 200,000 that was up from the Sheikh, because we have questions about it. We have questions about the transaction. Frank Anthony, in his explanation, mentioned reciprocity and that they relied on reciprocity. Reciprocity assumes that there is a state, etc., involved, and so you can have some level of assurance and reliance on the guarantees issued by the state as to the quality or otherwise of the vaccine. Now you have a middleman. We are now learning, and mind you, the majority of the MPs would have taken the Sputnik vaccine. And so, understandably, people who have been administered the vaccine ought to have a concern that what they have received is the genuine article, because chain of custody matters. And so you have a middleman that is now interrupting the chain of custody. And so it is the duty of the government to assure the Guyanese public that, look, this that we have on our hand is the authentic, is the genuine stuff. Not the mining and engaging in personal attacks and trying to make the opposition appear to be the bad guys. We learned in the National Assembly on Monday of this week that this thing was procured through a middleman. Are we to simply ignore that information? And so I find the government's approach to this ludicrous. Instead of saying, look, this is the information that we have, we want to assure the general public that we are taking all steps to ensure XYZ, and that the genuine article is national attacks, as if that will serve to assuage the doubts of Guyanese.
We're having some trouble now with Amanza's video, but that being said, the Trinidadian Prime Minister. Go right ahead, Amanza. Your audio was breaking up. Go right ahead.
No, I was making the point. Oh, sorry. Is that?
Go right ahead, Amanza.
Are you hearing me better now, Sharon?
I am hearing you. Go right ahead.
No, I was making the point that the Minister of Health has a duty to ensure that the health and well-being of Guyanese, that they're not jeopardized. And so,
yes,
in light of
that, yeah.
And that
no,
being
go ahead,
said,
gentlemen.
That being said, Prime Minister Rowley has talked up the importance of the fact that the vaccines we have received have not been approved by the World Health Organization. And the administration has pushed back on that through the GCCI, the Georgetown Chambers of Commerce. The advisor on health also has said, officially in a letter just this morning in Starbuck News, I want to quote part of it, that the Sputnik V COVID-19 vaccines are presently undergoing World Health Organization approval process and is expected to receive a WHO approval within months. The fact is they have not been approved. And so the Prime Minister of Trinidad was right. The Prime Minister has since put out a very specific statement pushing back on the commentary of the GCCI and Leslie Ramsamin, asking the government to basically correct what these guys have said.
Yeah, well, this is the rampant, autocratic nature and the arrogance of them, especially Leslie Ramsamy. From all the vilification that he suffered with the Roger Khan issue and the triangulation equipment, he's still an advisor there. And now, simply because a senior prime minister of this CARICOM is making a point to his people as to why he basically has done a good job for his countrymen. And in making that point, he had to clear up some ideas about this Sputnik because it is not WHO approved. They felt as if it was a telling blow to the PPP government. And so they're gone and they get scatterbrained now that we have brought out all this thing, and they started attacking Rowley. And of course, the government got its acolytes, blind as they are, to also put out a statement to attack the man. It is a shameless act, a disgraceful act, most repugnant on the part of the government and the part of the GCCI, I think it is, to make that kind of attack on Keith Rowley. And I rather suspect that more explanations and counter attacks by the Trinidadian government will come. because you just don't go and criticize them like that, especially for they in their right thinking and also analysis of the situation, saying that they don't want Sputnik because it has not been WHO approved. And that has happened in Barbados, that has happened in some other countries and so on. And a lot of the other powerful countries of the world, they haven't taken the Sputnik. I mean, I can say this, that based on the Lancet review and whatever, it does seem that the thing might very well be okay. But if a Trinidadian president or prime minister say that it is not okay for me, and although a lot has been received by Guyana, we are still better because we have WHO approved, why you vex with the people and then want to cuss them down? If they could do that to the Rowley, what is it that they're not going to do to us? And that is what they've been doing. They have been so hard-hitting and cussing me down on the social media and everywhere. And that is why you're not making sense out of their nonsensical moves. But Guyanese are going to get lots brighter as they see all of these atrocities and monstrosities appear all over the place. And so I find it very disgraceful what Leslie Ramsamy did.
And so the question has to be asked centrally: what is the purpose of an organization called the World Health Organization if their standards aren't going to be the gold standards? And I want to quote very briefly a document which talks about this approval process of the World Health Organization. It says the World Health Organization, through its Department of Regulation and Pre-Qualification, provides advice on the acceptability in principle of vaccines considered for purchase. This is known as the vaccine pre-qualification. In addition, WHO has developed a time-limited emergency use listing procedure to expedite availability of medical products needed for public health emergency situations such as COVID-19. The intention of the EUL is to provide expert advice on the acceptability for use of specific products in the context of public health emergency based on an essential set of available quality, safety, and efficacy, immunogenicity, and performance data. So a very, very comprehensive list of things that they are crossing off when they're looking at these vaccines for public consumption, especially in public health emergency situations. So you just can't say, well, they're going to approve it in another couple of months. You have already, formed that thought that they are going to approve it, and so we can go ahead and use it locally. Is that the right road that we are on?
Well, Amanza could help. In my opinion, it is not. Let me just say that. It is not. The World Health Organization is that gatekeeper that we all must abide by. And that gatekeeper has not yet approved the thing. Okay. And so you have then no systems in your Food and Drugs Department, that department that is headed by what a fellow name, and you are banking on by virtue of calling up certain other players. At the time when they made this purchase, I am trying to get whether the Lancet had already declared that it might be good enough. Because these people apparently buy this thing since 1st of April. April the 1st purchase. Well, that is April's Fool's Day. Remember that. And they bought it in the darkness of not wanting scrutiny. Because you could have come to Parliament to appropriate the monies and get some questions and so on about these things, and we probably could have helped them that don't buy nothing from Al Maktoum and them fellas. But they didn't. They gone and go straight to the Treasury. That is what a contingency means. Straight into the Treasury, dip the Treasury of $1.2 billion and spend $957 million on the chic. Look, this thing stinks. It got plenty corruption behind it. And the PPP will have to answer quite a lot. And moreover, they got to answer about the WHO approval and so on. So I don't want to repeat myself again, but I don't like what has happened there. And that's my commentary.
Mansa, your final thought for this afternoon on this issue as we seek to change gears.
Well, I don't like it either. And, outside of the nuances of the WHO and the approval, if we put aside the nuances, Sherrod and Kemraj, the principle remains that when it comes to the health of the public, transparency is of paramount importance. And so, if you cannot have a transparent process, you, the government, are basically undermining your interventions by your own conduct. And so we have to continue to make the point. We could continue to go back and forth about WHO approval or what the Lancet says, but the fundamental principle is that of transparency. The PPP has to understand that if people cannot trust their sourcing of drugs for COVID, of the vaccine for COVID, how are we trusting their procurement of pharmaceuticals for the Georgetown Hospital, for the Wisma Hospital? It is a fundamental issue that has to be addressed. And so the ego and the hubris that you see, and let me say, as Shadow of Foreign Affairs Minister, I am appalled at the statements made attacking a sitting Prime Minister and the chairman of CARICOM. And as Khemraj said, if they have the audacity to do that, can you imagine the contempt with which they must hold the ordinary Guyanese man and woman?
It is very, very.
So they're being revealed. They're being revealed every step of the way for who they really are. A kleptocracy, a mafia government, as I call them, who are just interested in, filling their pockets, even at the health of their own supporters, of their own people. Sherrod, I find it appalling. I find it appalling.
Amanza, you took the words out of my mouth. That it is very, very, it is very, very revealing. Their actions, that is extremely revealing. And just shifting gears a little bit, we are now on the second item on our order paper for this afternoon, which is basically it was an item on the second financial paper on the last sitting of Parliament, which dealt with the funding for regional joint support teams. That is according to the order paper. Regional joint support teams. Now we got very, very nervous when we saw this, because we can harken back to the days of the Black Clothes, for instance, with these kinds of regional joint support teams. And I went back, for instance, my mind went back to an old newspaper clipping. This is Monday, May 22nd, 2006, in which the headline reads, Army confirms officers met with Roger Khan. Army confirms. This is the Sabbath News headline. Officers met with Roger Khan. So we understand. And then I wanna add another dimension to it. This is now Friday, May 12th, 2006. Earlier, there was a big, a huge ad taken out in Kaichor News by Shahid Roger Khan, in which in part of this ad, he says, and I quote, during the crime spree of 2002, I worked closely with the crime fighting sections of the Guyana Police Force, etc. And I said all of that to say what is in the mind of the Guyanese people and what the administration seems to be trying to push back against has a basis. These regional security teams. Let me start with the former Minister of Public Security, now Home Affairs Ministry, Khemraj. Khemraj, you need to unmute your mic.
Sorry. I was saying that is why I got so vexed, very angry, and passionate with Grail when she said that she's not going to answer this as national security. But the very first answer that she gave to Joe Harmon indicated that this is a crime fighting institution. Now, once it is crime fighting, it must come under the police force. And the police force is not national security. The police force is public security and home affairs, to the extent that we could scrutinize every expenditure in Parliament as to what is going for crime fighting. She tried to give a slur to me about the horses and the dogs. But horses and dogs are essential for a police crime fighting force, the mounted branch and the canine section. And if we could have had better dogs and better horses, I am absolutely certain that we could catch more criminals, especially in the estate areas where vehicles can't go to the back, and also inside of the airport areas where these sniffer dogs, like in America and England and so many advanced countries, they can snitch on all those who carrying these stuff inside their luggage and even other places. But that is the slur she wanted, and she tried to distract and divert the answers that she ought to have given me. Now, to spend so much money on an institution for crime fighting that is going to be made up of army people and some policemen, she said, is entirely unconstitutional. You cannot take taxpayers' money to put it for crime fighting purposes anywhere else but those institutions that have been created by legislation or come under the Police Act, like KANU, SOKU, and so on, that comes under the Police Act and comes under or comes under a piece of legislation by itself. You have to do that. And then to go and spend, I don't know, it's how much, about $350 million or more, or about $700 million in that very big sum. And that is why when I ask the question, what kind of uniform they're going to be wearing now? Is it GDF, police, or what? Because they're a combination of both. She didn't answer the question. She started talking about horse and dog. This lady has gotten extremely arrogant. And she was one that fought for all these institutions. You know, she was a former Home Affairs Minister. And you have to make sure that where taxpayers' monies are going to, the opposition can scrutinize to the hilt so that we will know how many policemen are there. Remember in the budget of Sherrod, the first thing when you open the police page, you see 4,500 police, contract employees, this, that. Now you're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars, and we don't know whether these people are trained in, like, what you got to go now to the academy of the police before you can become a policeman. You got to know how to take a statement. You got to know the judge's rules. You got to know that you can't torture the suspect and this and that. And they're going to get a whole set of guns, big guns. Look, Sherrod, I believe that the PPP is scared, just like that 2006 period, and they want to set up what is called an extra parliamentary force to look after their safety and also to spy on the dissidents that will emerge from the various regions.
An extra paramilitary force.
Exactly, extra paramilitary, yes. That is what it is. So anybody that wants, and they're going to get spying equipment because Leslie Ramsamy and so on know where to get that from. And so also does Gail. And they're going to set this thing up, separate from the command of the commissioner or the chief of staff, and they will have at the head some person. Because I did ask the question, what is the structure? What is the reporting relationships with these two chief of staff and the commissioner in relation to this new unit that you're setting up here, giving so much? She did not answer again. She says national security. Look, it can't be national security when it's crime fighting. It's never. And we will have to take this thing far and wide because they're setting up something like a presidential guard that this guard Saddam Hussein and them all over in that country when those fellas like Gaddafi and so on. There's special set of guards made up of policemen that are loyal to them and more not loyal to the Constitution or the Police Act. And similarly, with army officers and army of ranks that are more loyal to them than to the Defense Act and the defense regulations. That is what we're doing here.
We are watching program time creeping up on us. Well, we just passed a little bit, but I want to get some of the engagements as I draw Amanza into the discussion on what transpired in Parliament on this question. And Amanza, I want your thoughts at the other side. Do I have
for
that?
this line item stands part of the estimates. And now for the question that the sum stated for this line item stands part of the estimates. Those in favor say aye.
Those
Those
against
against
say
say
no.
no.
The
The
ayes
ayes
have it.
have it.
The
The
sum
sum
stated
stated
now
now
stands
stands
part
part
of the
of the
estimates.
estimates.
For
For
line
line
item
item
6294,
6294,
I
I
propose the
propose the
question
question
that the
that the
sum
sum
stated
stated
stands
stands
part
part
of the
of the
estimates.
estimates.
The
The
Honorable
Honorable
Leader of the
Leader of the
Opposition.
Opposition.
Yes,
Yes,
Mr. Chair. Mr.
Mr.
Chairman, could
Chairman,
the
could the
Honorable
Honorable
Minister
Minister
state
state
what
what
would
would
this
the
sum
sum
of
of
84 million dollars be spent on the other?
Honorable Minister.
I don't think we have that queued up right, but the whole but we're still on that very issue of this extra paramilitary force that they're calling this regional joint support teams, and the exact purpose, because it's still very nebulous. MP Walton is here. Take off your yeah. Please put
Sharon,
on your mic.
I don't think that I could address it any more in detail than Khemraj has done. I want to tackle it from another perspective, not necessarily in terms of this force, because let me say this. If you are interested in doing one modicum of research, any bit of research, you will see that this is how dictatorships are set up and secured. And it is as easy as that. This is the information age. You can trace it back to all the way to South Africa when they had the apartheid regime, how they did it, to Saddam Hussein and all of the dictatorships, etc. This is not new information. The handwriting is on the wall. What concerns me, Sherrod, is the attitude towards the opposition, the parliamentary opposition, questioning this expenditure. What concerns me is that sometimes you find even members of the public, now apart from the speaker's attitude on this, because I have a problem with the manner in which speaker sort of interrupts the very pertinent questions that we ask in relation to expenditure of taxpayers' monies. I am afraid that our attitude is saying the opposition has no right to ask, let the government do what they want. And I want to caution our people that when you adopt that attitude, you are becoming complicit in your own oppression. You are becoming complicit in your own oppression. The role of the opposition is to act on your behalf. Because remember, particularly if you are raising the financing by debt, it is you and your children that got to pay back this money. Now, you as a parent, work hard for your money. Your child come, mommy, I want $1 million. You don't find out where you want it for. What you plan to do with it? How you paying me back? That is a microcosm of what happens in the National Assembly. They're coming to spend the people of Guyana money, the teachers and nurses, all of the people who ain't get a pay raise yet. It is their money they're coming to spend. And how dare you operate like the opposition doesn't have a right to question it? The people should be firmly behind us in ensuring that every dime of their monies are properly accounted for. But the political culture is as such that if you question an expenditure or you don't support it, and that is nonsensical, it is dangerous. And you see with this here, the fears are not baseless. We have been down this road before. And it is up to every Guyanese. They like to ask, what is the opposition doing? The parliamentary opposition, about 31 of us. We are bringing the information to our people. It is now for our people to start opening their mouths and using their voices to speak up against this. Because when Guyana descends into the state that I foresee the PPP wants us to descend to, the wealthy will pack themselves up on a plane, they and their families, and they will leave. And it is the ordinary Guyanese man and woman that will have to stay here and face the oppression. And so we are warning, we are calling out all of the danger signs that we are seeing. And the PPP will do everything in its power to discredit each and every one of us so that people don't take us seriously. But we will continue to speak, we will continue to call it out. The handwriting is very, very clear on the wall. If we refuse to read it, it will be to our detriment, Sharon. It will be to our complete and utter detriment.
Sure. Point that a number of the PPP parliamentarians apparently did not know of the motives behind these expenditures and how that Sputnik was bought. Do you know that it's because of the opposition they get to know a lot about what happened there? They did not know of those things. Even their own supporters, even their own members of parliament.
Yeah.
I a call name, didn't tell me by me and didn't even know what they had.
Yeah. And it's
And
because
then I
of
told
the
them that
opposition,
you
they know
cannot.
what's happening at Guy Oil and GPL and all the other places. But folks, as we conclude, I don't want to go much further.
Yeah.
I know there's a strong case that is being made that the opposition disengaged from parliament. But everything we've discussed this afternoon tells us why the opposition is very, very relevant in staying in parliament and putting these questions, scrutinizing and exposing them at this very, very high level. Not so.
That's correct. That is correct. We have to have. Look, in a democracy, you're going to have the majority party running the government, but the opposition will scrutinize them right down to the last dot, and and that is important. That is what democracy is all about. And it is the responsibility of the government to give proper answers. Amanza is right. The way that they are giving their answers is like they're reading out of a dictator's handbook. Obviously, the way they answered my question on that two-trawler license, and the way they answer Ganesh Mahipal on some of his questions, and a lot of other people, and the way they were answering my questions on this regional force, and so on. So it is important that people understand that we have to be there. That is also why they don't want our man David Patterson on that Public Accounts Committee, because he's far more experienced than the other three to hold them accountable. And they're going to say that they have to have confidence in him. And if they don't have confidence in him, he must go. Well, that is a total trash. What that motion proved, if I may just transfer a little, is that the main opposition to every single man has voted for David Patterson. And that is why I feel that we should show some defiance and go back and put David Patterson straight there. Because the standing order says that he must have the confidence of the opposition, the main opposition. Not Schuman, not the governing party. And so although you got a resolution, that resolution I think should be defied by all of our 31 members to the extent that that motion proved that he got the total support of that which he got to get it from.
I want to, Sharon, give me 1 minute to make an important
Go right ahead, Mansa.
point
Go right ahead.
on this same PAC matter. We like to talk about the infamy that Guyana suffers from as it relates to the biggest drug bust in the world, in the history of the world. I want our people to understand that that motion and its passage was tantamount to that infamy as it relates to the Commonwealth parliamentary system.
Right.
And so people may think that it is a nebulous thing and unrelated to their daily lives, but Guyana must now suffer the embarrassment of having a government who so wants to defy scrutiny, that they use what we call the tyranny of numbers.
Majority.
because they have the majority in the parliament to remove a chair. This is a drug bust. This is equivalent to that drug bust in the Commonwealth parliamentary system. People have to understand it is that serious. And so if we take
now the abusing of the CARICOM chairman.
and so if we take a principled stand on it, and if we say David Patterson must go back, people must understand the reason why we are insisting, because how much embarrassment must Guyana continue to suffer in the international arena at the hands of these people? How much before we say enough? And so if we say David Patterson should go back right there, people must understand that it is a fundamental principle. People got to understand, if we allow that, every chair of the PAC, if you don't agree with the government, can be moved. And guess what? Even when the APNU AFC goes back into office, we would be okay to do that because you have established a precedent. The guardrails, as Khemraj would say, of democracy continue to be eroded, and it is only the people that will suffer. And I keep saying to our people, it's time to speak up. Speak up now before your rights are eroded to a point where you become prisoners in your own land.
No, seriously. The PPP believes that democracy is only winning an elections or elections. But every day after an elections, the reinforcement of the guardrails of democracy, like these various conventions, not interfering with the Police Service Commission members by calling them, promote Brutus, promote this Kuribai. Why are you not promoting him? Them is me by, and so on. That is the guardrails being dismantled. You must not do that. And so we are in a journey now that is very disastrous, and it's a lot of catastrophes that we're going to face, not only with flooding and COVID, but lots more in relation to all these guardrails. Thanks, Sherrod. I have to go now. And
MP Walton-Desir, MP Khemraj Ramjattan, thanks for joining me this afternoon. I know you guys are going to switch off, so I kind of switched quickly. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Folks, this is supposed to be a half-hour program, but the information is so rich, we couldn't just cut our MPs there. It's supposed to be a half-an-hour program that looks at all things parliamentary, the issues and the individuals in the House, scrutiny of bills and motions, questions brought, answers tabled, and more so how all of these affect us as citizens. Thanks for joining me this afternoon. Usually we have told you last week that this program is going to be aired at 12 o'clock on Saturdays, but we did add a caveat as the need arises if we need to come back because matters are pressing of public importance and urgent. We're going to come before that time as we did this afternoon. Thanks for staying with us. And guys, I'm going to see you in a few hours when we take the whip in the ring. See you at 8, folks. Thanks for joining us for the whip. Stay safe.